7. And McCarron goes down the field, and it's caught and breathes in for the touchdown.
Two things in life that suck: death, taxes, and 85 will always go.
Welcome to New Stripe City, an urban podcast for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie, and today's episode is episode number 8, entitled Mega Move. And in today's episodes, we'll talk about the possibility, if there is, even if it is minimal, that Calvin Johnson can be traded or signed from the Detroit Lions, and what his impact would be on the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll also talk about the most impact signings around the division, which ones were the best between the Browns, the Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll also talk about the preseason schedule and wrap things up with my thoughts on why the Bengals should not trade A.J. McCarron to the Denver Broncos. Let's kick things off in the jungle. And we'll get things started with our first segment, press coverage. And in recent Bengals related news, Ike Taylor rates the Bengals the number 3 cornerback tandem in the NFL. And Jeremy Hill and George Iloka speak their piece on the recent police shootings that occurred last week. Training camp dates have also been announced. You can find them on our website, but we will also go through the specific dates for them at the end of this podcast. PFF named Andy Dalton the 3rd least pressured quarterback in 2015 with a rate of 28.9%. Duke Tobin recently praised Mario Alford and Jake Kumerow and pinned those guys as some receivers that he looks to expand upon their roles in the next season. And last but not least, YouTube and the NFL have announced the game winners decided for which games will be uploaded onto YouTube. The games consist of the 2015 Bengals and Seahawks game, the 1981 Bengals and Chargers Freezer Bowl game, and the last one is the 2003 Bengals vs. Chiefs game, in which the Cincinnati Bengals defeated at the time the 10-0 undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. So as usual, we have our announcement segment in which I take time to just deliver some important announcements that we have out. And our first announcement is that thanks to you guys, our Andy Dalton is Elite video has now superseded 1,000 views. I can't thank you guys anymore. I'm glad to see that this video was one of my first viral videos to see on my YouTube channel. And make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys jump in the comment box, like them. For those who are just the listeners, our YouTube channel has a little bit of a different experience for New Stripe City. So you get to see not only highlights, but you get to see a little bit more than you would just get strictly listening to it. So make sure, if you have already listened to the audio only portion, that you check out the video only portion on our YouTube. And our YouTube channel, as you guys know, is New Stripe City. Our second announcement, thanks to you guys, we're now able to see some of the ratings, so make sure that you rate us. This is a great podcast. I've got so many comments, and the more that you guys review and leave comments, the more I'll get into the habit of shouting you guys out, because I truly appreciate you guys. Truly appreciate you guys listening, taking time out of your day, and this is who I make this show for. I make this for the fans, so I'd love to hear feedback from the fans. So make sure you check us out on iTunes at New Stripe City. And if you don't have iTunes, we also have SoundCloud for some of our new listeners. So if you guys have an Android phone and you don't have access to the iTunes store, you can always check us out on SoundCloud as well. One thing that I'm going to try to just figure out, just to ensure that we are meeting you guys' every needs, is that I'm going to run a poll that's going to vote on the length of the show, whether you guys want it to be between 10 to 15 minutes, whether you want it to be 25 to 30 minutes or longer. So be on the lookout for that. I'll actually post it on our website at newstripecity.blogspot.com. Make sure you check on there. You can leave a comment on YouTube, a comment on SoundCloud, whichever way you guys feel is a easier way for you to have your voices heard. Let me know, because we're always looking for ways to improve the show and make sure that we're meeting your needs. I'm excited about this last announcement. Game of Stripes is a series that you guys are familiar with, but I want to do a tweak on Game of Stripes, which is another segment in which it will be the what if component. So the first what if component will be a summary of what the Bengals would look like with Calvin Johnson on their team, starting across from AJ Green. Kind of scary, right? So we'll be able to actually see how much better a guy like Megatron would make this team. Also, there will be future ones such as Carson Palmer not leaving or any scenarios that you guys like. Feel free to drop them in the comment box, and I'll be sure to try to make that come true for you. And looking at my watch, it's about that time. Bengals Real Talk. And starting off Bengals Real Talk, we'll talk about Megatron and looking at how we can bring Megatron to Cincy. So as you know, Megatron recently spoke on his decision to retire. He stated that it was a combination of his injuries as well as his attitude towards the team and how he felt that they weren't in a position to continue winning games, and he did not want to sacrifice his body anymore for him to go through another season of up and downs in the wins and losses category. Now, to me, I totally understand this. I kind of felt like this was the whole reason that he decided to lay down the pads in the first place, was because he wasn't winning enough. I mean, we saw this with Barry Sanders, and we saw that he's been on this team and been a marquee player, but they've only been to the playoffs twice since he's been there. Bruh. So to me, this is a way of Megatron trying to force his way out of Detroit. Now, the thing is, it doesn't really seem like Detroit is trying to let him go. So I wanted to take a look at some scenarios in which Calvin Johnson can get his way out of Detroit. So starting off, we know that Detroit used our former receiver Marvin Jones to replace him once they figured out that Megatron would likely not be coming back. So Megatron's kicker for 2016, actually he had a $24 million cap number. So right now, the Detroit Lions have $16 million in cap space. If Megatron was to unretire right now, they'd have to cut some players to make room for him, or they'd have to be forced to trade him, which they say they would not want to do. So in this scenario, we would have to have Megatron not only be able to be a trade asset, but also we would have to ensure that he would have to restructure how much hard cap he has for this year for us to even be able to make that move possible. It is possible, but it's a slight chance. It's a very minimal chance of this happening, and the Detroit Lions would still own the rights to him. So it would be a similar situation in which Carson Palmer had with the Bengals when he wanted to force his way out. So there'd have to be a common meeting on both sides to agree that it's time for them to part ways. But this would be a valid option. It's not impossible. It could happen. There could be some restructuring of the deal that would happen if he were to be traded to Cincinnati. Cincinnati has had trade relationships with Detroit in the past. We've seen them trade for Shaun Rogers in the past, another guy who was one of the staples of the franchise, but that trade fell through due to the language of the contract. So that would be an option that the Bengals could pursue, but it's not really likely for us to get him in stripes that way. So next, we'll look at some of the cap numbers for the Bengals to determine our second option. If Megatron is able to wait out the remainder of his contract and sign outright with the Cincinnati Bengals. So Megatron signed a 7-year contract in 2012 as far as an extension with the Detroit Lions. that extension runs until 2019. So another option that Megatron could have is he could wait out the remainder of his contract in 2019 and then unretire and come back and be a free agent and be able to sign wherever he would want to. His rights would not belong to the Detroit Lions anymore.
There's a lot of people thinking, like, what if he sat out for a year and came back and then went and got a ring?
It's funny, like, I mean, and that it would be something to consider, but when I was in Boston a couple of weeks ago, it was like, oh, shoot, you coming up here? Nah, I got a contract I'm running with Detroit, and that contract is going to stay in Detroit, you know, and Detroit's not letting the contract go, so.
Oh, well, wait a second. If you came back, it would be for Detroit. Is that just strictly based on the contract? Like, if you had your way and they were free, would you come back and maybe help?
And so this will present the Bengals with an option to be able to sign him. So going through the free agent numbers, if you look at the cap space, the Bengals, according to Over the Cap, in 2017 will have $41 million in total cap space. In 2018, they will have $73.5 million. In 2019, they will have $133 million. And in 2020, they will have $133 million. Now, if there is some kind of agreement that comes between 2017 and 2020 between Megatron and allowing the Detroit Lions to trade him, then this is irrelevant. But the Bengals definitely have a realistic chance of signing Megatron in 2019, 2020, or so on. And Megatron at that age will be around 33 to 34 years old, and he will not have much wear and tear on his body. He'll still be able to play in the NFL. So this is an enticing option for the Bengals to also bring Megatron to the jungle. So, to me, in my eyes, why would we bring Megatron into the jungle? The Cincinnati Bengals clearly have lacked a good receiver across from AJ Green. It's arguably the position on the roster that lacks the most depth. If you put a guy like Megatron on the same field as AJ Green with a guy like Tyler Eifert, there's no way that this isn't a surefire, minus injuries, Super Bowl team or Super Bowl bound team. This is a option that could happen realistically. I mean, Megatron could definitely look to change his mind. When he was interviewed today, it looks like he's already contemplating pulling that card. So this would make the Bengals it would just be ridiculous if this was to actually happen. So right now, all we can do is have our conspiracy theories, but I wanted to show that it is a possibility that can happen, but more so on the free agent route, unless the Detroit Lions decide to finally ship him off. And if that is another option with the trade, what would it take to get Megatron out there? If I were to put my GM hat on, I would probably say you're looking at least a first rounder, either this year or next year, maybe a second rounder, a third rounder. With the Bengals having all of those comp picks, it could happen next year. So that would be an ideal time for the Bengals to try to make that trade, because they'll have some compensatory picks from Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Andre Smith, and Emmanuel Lamore that will be available next year. So the Bengals typically don't like, and Mike Brown typically doesn't like, to come up off of his draft picks. But for a player like Megatron, you have to consider it. With that being said, there is no guarantee that Calvin will be in stripes, but it's nice to think that there is a possibility of it happening. And next, I'll touch on the best signings for the division. So starting off with Baltimore, the best signing for these guys clearly was Eric Weddle. Their secondary was horrible. To me, in the draft, like I've said before, they didn't do much to solidify it or improve it. But to me, Eric Weddle is a better option than what they had last year. Now, Eric Weddle has struggled a little bit recently. It could have been more of a distraction with some of the off-the-field stuff and some of the politics that he went through in San Diego. But Eric Weddle, bar none, the new safety there, is definitely the strongest signing for the Baltimore Ravens. And moving on to Cleveland. Cleveland, obviously, their best signing was RG3. After going through guys like Johnny Manziel, being the mistake by the lake, going through all of these quarterbacks. RG3 is a solid signing for them. I think that they can revitalize his career, and I have more faith in Hue Jackson revitalizing his career, because when you see what he did with guys like Jason Campbell, Carson Palmer, Andy Dalton, he's somewhat of a quarterback guru, and he can get the best out of his quarterbacks. So I look to see RG3 being the best signing there. That's finally a guy that they have that's a marquee name, a respectable guy, has a good resume. So I'd have to go with RG3. And moving on to the Steelers, I'd probably say that the best signing that the Steelers made as far as a free agent that wasn't on their team, that was brought back, is Ladarius Green. Ladarius Green was a pretty fluid tight end out in San Diego. He was the heir apparent to Antonio Gates, but Antonio Gates just had a monster season last year, and he's not yet ready to be replaced. So Ladarius Green will be a key part of their offense. He's replacing Heath Miller. He's coming in. He's more of a receiving kind of tight end, but he can play in a bunch of sets. So I look for him to be an option that the Bengals will have to pay attention to next year and key in on. And that brings up my preseason analysis. So the Bengals have to play the Minnesota Vikings, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Detroit Lions. The first game is the preseason game against Mike Zimmer's Minnesota Vikings, which is on August 12th. So in this game, I see the Bengals having a pretty hard time against the Vikings. Both teams are deep. Both teams have different assets. I look forward to seeing the matchup of Laquan Treadwell against a guy like Pac-Man Jones or Drake Kirkpatrick. I also look to see what Stephon Diggs is going to do. It'll be nice to see what this Bengals secondary does against these new weapons that the Minnesota Vikings have. Also, I'll be looking for our receivers to see how they balance out against the young Minnesota Vikings secondary. They're young, but they're talented, so it'll be nice to see what some of these guys can do. I'll be looking to see what Andrew Billings can do against this revamped Minnesota Vikings offensive line. That's going to be another one. It'll be interesting to also see Emmanuel Lamore and Andre Smith against the Cincinnati Bengals, but I think with this game being at Paul Brown, I think the Bengals will pull this one out. We have a pretty deep team, so I think that we'll pull it out, but it'll be a close one. I'll probably say that this one will go 20-17. And moving on to our next game at Detroit at Ford Field on the 18th of August, I see the Bengals also winning this one. It'll be a pretty emotional game because it'll be Marvin Jones coming back to face the Cincinnati Bengals, in which I think he will honestly play a little bit harder than he should. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some plays from Marvin Jones. It'll be interesting to see how he meshes with Golden Tate. Also, how those guys mesh up against our corners, our younger corners. It'll be interesting to see who we will have in the slot, which guys will guard which guys. But I think at the end of the day, we pulled this one off because we are extremely more deep on our roster over and in comparison to Detroit. So I think that the Bengals pulled this one out, especially in the dome. Andy's going to look to get on the board early. This could be a game where he may play a little bit longer. The offense may play a little bit longer. But I can see that this Detroit game will be very good. It'll also be nice to see some of the young Bengals receivers against a guy like Darius Slay. That will be very interesting. And the next game on August 28th, I'm actually going to be at this game because it's in Florida, but the Bengals take on the Jaguars. This will be a very interesting game. The Jaguars had a very explosive offense last year. They have new guys in there like Chris Ivory. It'll be nice to see what their defense looks like, but this is going to be another tight one. I probably will still give the edge to the Bengals, barely. But this will be a good game. Both teams are starting to develop, and I think that, to me, the Jaguars kind of will remind me of the Bengals. They're not, I guess, as talented as we are, but they're doing things the right way. They're building through the draft. They're taking some chances on some of these free agents, but they're taking calculated risk, and they're building back up their franchise. And they have guys that are talented like Allen Robinson, Blake Bortles showed some promise last year. We'll get to see the new rookie corner in Jalen Ramsey and how he matches up against a guy like AJ Green. That'll be a game that I am physically going to be at, so I can examine entirely all of that game. So I can't wait to see how that game's going to go down. But man, finally some games down here in the FLA. This brings me to my final thoughts. The Bengals should not trade AJ McCarron to the Broncos, and here is why. The Broncos, number one, just won a Super Bowl. Why would we, as the Bengals, hand over a good asset in AJ McCarron, who we know is a good quarterback, for the cheap to the team that just won the Super Bowl, who plays in the same conference? That's pretty stupid.
You stupid.
No, I'm not.
What's 9 plus 10?
21.
You stupid.
I've seen analysts trying to make sense of it. It's stupid. That doesn't help the Cincinnati Bengals win. Okay? So when the Broncos lost their quarterback with Brock Osweiler, that helped us out. That helped increase our chances of making it to the Super Bowl. We should not shoot ourselves in the feet and trade AJ McCarron, who we know is a good player, to a team with one of the best defensive players in the league. I mean, we're not only helping them keep Von Miller, we're giving them a quarterback. It's like, hey, take this good quarterback too. Bruh. Like, we're not giving them somebody like Tim Tebow. Like, AJ McCarron is a good quarterback, so no, I'm not going to do that. I don't care if they don't play in the AFC North. They still play in the AFC. Second, CA. Bruh. Why are we doing this? It makes no sense. I mean, even if we get a draft pick from them, is it really going to be that high? Knowing John Elway and how he works things, is it really going to be that high of a draft pick? And why not keep AJ McCarron off of somebody else's roster to help ensure that we do win a championship? I mean, if Andy Dalton goes down, we can still hang our hats on the fact that we know that McCarron is a pretty good quarterback. I mean, the guy almost just got the very first playoff win in Cincinnati. I mean, come on, guys. Bruh. Third, if you're gonna trade AJ McCarron, you're gonna have to trade him to a team that you know is starting over. To me, when this trade rumor first came about, I thought that we should have traded him to the Rams. Obviously, things have changed for the Rams as they've selected their quarterback of the future. But to me, you have to trade him to a team where they are horrible, absolutely no threat, and you trade him to a team that's in the NFC, because that way you get a better draft pick, you get a chance to know that your window of opportunity of winning a Super Bowl is still open without him posing a threat, and you get to enjoy a winning season. And that brings us to our next segment, which is our poll recaps. So I have 2 recaps that I'm doing this time. The first one is our Color Rush recap, which was a very popular one, which totaled 69 votes. And our next one will be the free agent outlook poll and which free agent the Bengals should sign. So both of these polls were posted up on our website. We also post them in Facebook groups, so if you're a part of any of those Bengals Facebook groups, you've probably seen the polls placed there, but it is also on our Twitter as well. And getting into our poll recaps, we have the Color Rush recap. So as you can see, we have a pie chart here which shows that most Bengals fans preferred the white and black stripes. It totaled out at 35 total votes, 50.7%. It was clearly the option that Bengals fans want to see. So it would be nice to see if that can come to fruition with the Color Rush this year. If not this year, maybe in future years. Second, we had the All Orange, which captured 17 votes at a rate of 24.6%. My favorites. I really like those joints. Next, we also have the Black with hints of orange. It came in third with 11 votes and 15.9% of that pie. And last but not least, In last place was the All Black, which is rumored to be what we could possibly be looking at, but it only received 6 votes, 8.7% of the total voting percentage, so those don't look to be a good option. Moving on, we have our second poll, in which our number 1 player was Anquan Boldin, the wide receiver from San Francisco, who's currently a free agent. Anquan captured 39% of the vote and also had 16 votes of the 41. Dante Whitner came in second place with 17.1% and 7 votes. And Dwight Freeney came in third with 14.6% of the total votes with 6 votes himself. And with our new Stripe City poll, I asked you guys the question, should the Bengals trade for Megatron or should they wait until he is a free agent? Let me know, guys, what you think the Bengals should do. In conclusion, I'd like to say thanks for tuning in, thanks for voting, thanks for interacting. I love seeing you guys comment. I love seeing you guys rate the show. I love seeing that this is really taking off. So let me know in the comment box what you guys would like to see me talk about. I want to have some new guests on here. Let me know who you guys think that I should bring on here or who I should talk about, what we should do. But all in all, man, who day. I know there's been a lot of things going on in the media lately, but we can't let things get us down. We have to stand together, we have to stand united, and we have to come together, man. They're trying to separate us, but we got to come together and do what's right. We know what's the right thing to do. So with that being said, I'll leave you guys out with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday. Peace, love, and happiness.